Hello everyone, welcome to Learn with Gege. Today we will be embarking on a very exciting journey. We shall be creating a quiz app on MIT App Inventor. Stay tuned as this is going to be a very exciting, fun-filled and a learning packed experience. So the first thing we are required to do as soon as we get on the MIT App Inventor interface is to go to our new project, and as soon as you get to you click on the new project, you'll be prompted to give a name to the project. And since we are creating a quiz app, I am just simply going to call it quiz. And as soon as I type the name, I would just hit OK, and you give it a few seconds for the interface to load. Okay, here we go. So before we get into the business of the day, just for the sake of those that may not have followed through previous classes, let's do a quick run through of the interface. The MIT App Inventor interface is made up of 4 sections. On the far left, we have a collection of components that we use in building our applications. We have the buttons, we have the checkbox, we have things like the date picker, we have the image, we have the label, and so on and so forth. In the middle of the screen, we have the phone image, which allows you to see what your application would look like eventually when it is completed. On the right of that image, we have the components window. At the very beginning, the first component that is displayed is the screen 1. As you begin to add more components to your screen, they would be added below it. And then on the far right corner, we have the properties window. For every component you bring up on your screen, there will be properties for such components. We are going to be exploring all of this in the course of building the quiz app. Okay, so we want to build this app to be such that it has questions and options, and the user is able to select the right answer from a list of given options. So the very first thing I would be using here is a label. The very first component we need is a label, so I'm going to pick the label component and then drag it onto the screen and drop it. As soon as I do that, if you take a look, label has been added as a component in the components section of our screen. The next thing I want to do is to bring up 4 different buttons that would be serving as options. So this is the first button. I'll bring up another button. I'll bring up a third button. I'll bring up a 4th button, and then I also need a label that would display the result of my operation. This second label is going to be used to tell the user if the answer provided is correct or wrong. And then finally, I would be needing another button which I would name as the next button, which would take us to the next question, and that enables us to progress. So if you take a close look, right now we have about 7 components. We have a label at the top, we have 4 buttons which represent the 4 options, and then we have another label which is going to indicate if our answer or the option we have selected is correct or wrong. And then we have a button at the bottom which is going to be used to switch to the next question. Rename each of our component. To do that, all I need to do is to click on the component, and then I hit my rename button, and then I want this first guy to be renamed to question label. I want it to be called question label, which is going to be holding all my questions, and then I hit OK. As soon as I do that, I would go down to the text property at the bottom on the far right, and then I will also change the text to question label 1 so that it corresponds, and I would also decide to make it bold so that it can be easily readable. And as soon as I make all of those changes, you can see that on the screen it has changed. Assuming I want the font size to also increase a little bit to, let's say, 16 or 18, I would just do that. And if you take a look at the screen, the font size has changed as well. I'll repeat the same procedure for each of the components, and that is how you can rename your components, as well as add other properties. You can change the font style to italic if you want. You can change the size. You can do a whole lot of other things which we would be exploring as time goes on. Okay, so we have successfully renamed all our components and everything is looking beautiful right now. On our screen, we have the question label, which is going to hold our questions. We have 4 options which would hold the options for the question, and then we have a result label which is going to display if the answer or the option you have selected is correct or wrong. And then we have the next button, which is going to prompt our application to bring up the next question. And like I said earlier on, if you look at the component window right now, all the components that we have brought onto the screen are listed from the question label, the 4 answer options, the result label, and the next button. And we can do a whole lot of work regarding the properties window if we want to probably, let's say, we want to change the background color of the next button to something like green. I will do that, and as soon as I do that, you can see. So having done all of this, the next thing for us to do is to move to our blogs. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video to other kids out there who are willing and eager to learn computer coding. Thank you. Okay, so to switch into the blocks window, all you need to do is to click on this green button that says blocks, and as soon as you do that, you discover that the interface has changed into what we have right now. And on the far left corner, you can see that we have blocks of codes. We have code blocks like the control, the logic, the math, the text, the list, the dictionaries, colors, variables, procedures. These are all different code blocks that we are going to be exploring as time goes on. And then below the code blocks, we have all our components. The first component right there is our screen 1. Below the screen 1, we have our question label. We have our 4 option buttons. We have our result label, and then we have our next button. Now, this is where the actual activities will begin. The very first thing we are going to be doing right now is to declare our variables, and to do that, all you need to do is to click on the variables blocks. And once you click on the variables block, it brings up the set of variables. We want to initialize a global variable. We drag and drop it, and this variable, we want it to be the variable that would hold our questions. So to do that, we need a list block. We will need to click on the list blocks and then pick the one that says make a list. We'll drag that and then add it. Right now we need, for this application, we need about 3 questions. So I have only 2 slots right now on this block. I want to have more slots. I would click on that blue little icon right there, and then I'll add another list on it. As soon as I do that, you can see we now have 3 slots. The next thing I'm going to do is to go to my text block, and then I will pull up the empty text block, and I can type the questions that I want. I will duplicate this, duplicate it again, and then I'll fix it. this is the variable that is going to hold my questions. So the first question I'm going to be asking is what is the capital of France? My next question would be, who is the president? The president of Nigeria. And the last question I am going to be asking is what is the capital? What is the capital of Kenya? So what we have done so far is to initialize our variable, and I need to change this variable to global questions. So I would quickly click on that name there and change it to questions, because that's questions. And as soon as I do that, so we have our very first variable, which is going to be our question variable. The next important variable we are going to be creating would be the options variables. For every question there's going to be options. So let's go again to our variables block, and then we hit our initialize global variable. This time around we are going to rename it as options. Rename it as options. And we also want to go back to our list and select make a list block. This time around we need 3 slots again. So all we do is to click on the blue icon, add it, and we'll have an additional slot. So here is a little trick. For each of the questions, we have 3 questions. Each of the question is going to have 4 options. What that implies is that we are going to be having a total of 12 options. So I would go back to my to my list rather, and bring up another make a list block, and I would make it to have 4 slots. This is going to be my options for question 1, and then I will duplicate this for my options for question 2. Finally, I will display this, duplicate this, and then I have my options for question 3. Now all we need to do is to go to our text block, bring up the empty text, and begin to fill the options for each question. The first question says, what is the capital of France? I can decide to give options like London. I'll duplicate that, and then I'll give the next option as Paris, and then I'll duplicate that as well. I would say Abuja, and then I would duplicate this, and the last option I would say Nairobi. So what I have done right now is to declare my options variable, and then I am already filling it up with all the options. 4 options for each question. Right now we have been able to fill the options for the first question. We'll go ahead, do the same thing, and fill up the other questions. So right now we have finished up with our 2 major variables, which is the questions variable and the options variables. The next important thing we are going to be doing is to come up with the procedure that is going to fetch our each question for each page. So to do that, we go to the procedures block, and then we pick the first procedure, the one that says to procedure do, and just like before, we drag it onto our screen, and then we begin to supply the necessary codes. So what happens, the reason for us having a procedure is because we are going to be using this block of code over and over, and we don't want to be creating it several times. So we're going to create a procedure for it, and every time we need this particular instruction, we would call the procedure instead of writing the code afresh. So the first item we need here is to set our question, and for us to do that, we need to go to the question label, which is the first component. We click on it, and then we are looking for set question label.text to. We will drop it right there. We want to set question label.text to select from our list of questions. So we'll go to the list blocks, and then this time around we are going to be picking the one that says select. And once we select from our list blocks, the first thing we want to do is to say, okay, let's go back to our variables, and this time around we're going to be using the get variables block. And what variable are we getting? We want to get the questions variables. So we select the questions variable, and then in the index we want to get the current questions index, which we have not created. So very quickly, our current question index is initialized to 1, and then back to our procedures, we would go back to get, and in the index we fix our current question index right there. Okay, the next thing we are going to do right now is to initialize a local variable. So we'll go back to our variables, and this time around it's not going to be a global variable, it has to be a local variable. So we have initialized the local variable, and we named it as options. This is the variable that is going to be holding our options for each question, and then we initialize it to get its items from the global options variable, and then the index should be the current question index. Next thing, we are going to begin to work on our answer buttons. So we go to button 1, and then we'll set answer button 1 dot text. Let's look for set answer button 1 dot text. We'll drop it right there, and we want to set it to also select list item, item index, and then we want it to get options. We want it to get options, and we want to set the index to 1. So we'll go to the math block. We'll pick the first block right there, and we will set it to 1 instead of 0. We'll repeat the same procedure for each of the options. We'll repeat the same thing. Right here, we change it to 4. Index to 4. And the last but not the least, we are going to set our result label.text. So this is what is going to display. Set result label.text. We want to set it to an empty text. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our procedures block. The next thing we are going to be working on is our screen 1. We want the first question to load as soon as screen 1 is loaded. As soon as our application finishes loading, we want the screen 1 to be loaded. So we will click on the screen 1 just like we did for every other component, and as soon as we click on it, we are going to be selecting the block that says when screen 1 dot initialize, and we bring it onto the screen for coding. And then the first thing we are going to be doing is to set our global current question index to 1. Question index, we are setting it to 1. I can just duplicate this last block here and then change it to 1. And then after that, I am going to call my procedure. To call my procedure, I will go to the procedures block, and now I will just drag my call procedure into the block. At this point, we are going to connect our application to our phone to test our progress so far and be sure that everything is working accordingly before we proceed. Thank you. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video to other kids out there who are willing and eager to learn computer coding. Thank you. So right here on my phone, everything is going as planned. I have my first question displayed. I have my list of options displayed. I have my next button. But right now we are yet to code for the next button, and we are yet to even code for it to know which answer is correct. So nothing is going to really work at this point. But I'm glad that our app is going as planned.